there I was, trying to fit in and just trying to find my place. So very often it was really tough to adjust. I remember every evening after class I could go back to my bed and just break down in tears. Things were so tough, and things never got better at home. You just talk, mom is perhaps sick. One of your sisters, has been sent home because there's no school fees. So all these family issues, always, and me being in a situation where I feel, I just wish I could be able to do anything, but there's nothing I can do about it. I'm also just as another student in school. So again, it takes me back to that, sort of a trend that, I'm in a situation where, I wish I could be of help, but there's nothing. I just feel helpless and disempowered. There's nothing I can do about it. One of my toughest challenges, I would say, for me was to be born in a community or perhaps a society where opportunities were not very equally distributed. And to really, I mean, I quickly realized early on in life that a lot of us had so much potential, and potential seems to be very well distributed all over. However, the opportunities for that potential to be truly unleashed seems to be very limited to a few people. And so for me, that element, from my schooling days to the kind of education I was able to get, there were so many challenges, that revolved around this access to opportunity. I grew up in a family of, we are seven siblings, and there are always other family relatives that grew, with us. So it was always a big family. And this one big family relying, my dad was a civil servant for most, but he's now retired. And my mom just did some small scale businesses. So for the most of it, there was just one reliable source of income on my father's end. It was a civil servant who had some little salary at the end of the month, and we all had to rely on this. So that was really tough. It meant the way priorities were distributed, and they wanted the best for us as the children. They wanted us to get an education. For them, both my parents didn't have the opportunity to, go with the father in their education for several reasons, but they always believed in the power of an education. So they did whatever was in their power. They made so much sacrifices to just ensure that their children at least get an opportunity of an education, which they did not. But with very limited resources, that always meant some tough decisions and some tough choices had to be made. But for the most of it, I've been generally very lucky. I was able to do most of my primary education in my small town of Lira. And when I finished my primary education, I was at the verge of dropping out of school. And that's because when I finished my primary schooling, I was supposed to begin my secondary education. That was at the same time when two of my elder sisters were joining the university, and that meant a lot of strain in terms of the resources our parents could provide. So I was at that verge whether it was either get some sort of scholarship that would see me in school, or stay out of school for some time and just maybe just do housework and look after cattle in the village. So it was at that point that I really began to realize the sort of challenge that my parents were going through to see us in school. And I think as a kid, I always really empathized, because I earlier on began to realize and recognize how much our parents had to sacrifice to just see us in school and to see that, we got an opportunity that both of them did not have access to. So I remember this one conversation that, one evening, our dad just gathered us around in the living room, at home, and he basically laid down to us, what the reality was on the ground, that, things were getting very tough, the demands were getting higher, but the resources were still remaining, pretty much very limited, and it was more of a survival for the fittest. I remember my dad saying that, So, we had to work extremely hard in school to stay in school. So if there was someone who was doing, much better and the other was seeming to be relaxed, then the priority would have to be made on the people who were, really giving the best in school and bringing in the results. But in my case at this point, I had sort of, done my part. And, the parents throw the ball at you. You got to do well in school. You have to work really hard. And I think at this point, the results I'd produced really showed that I'd done my part. And the ball was back to the parents now. And for me, too, it was quite frustrating to see them in that position where, I sort of put myself in their place. As a parent, how would I feel like, having told the child, do your best and do this, and the child has surely done the best, and now you want the best for the child, but you do not have everything it takes to really see them, realize their full potential. So, for a moment, it was that big feeling of frustration. It was a deep feeling of, when I just think about it, for me, it was not more about, I felt sort of, betrayed or, I felt let down. But, I was sort of, from a more empathetic point of view, just thinking more about, what my parents were going through. And I think that was a little bit unusual, especially, for a young boy of my age at the time, that I was more thinking about, the situation that my parents were in. Because the truth is, I'd really seen how much, they'd done for us, and I'd been observing how much they sacrificed for us. So it wasn't that I, began to doubt if they really cared about me or not, but it was more of, from that point of, I know they want the best for me, but I also know that things are really tough for them. And so, it was sort of being in between, a hard surface and a very rough, situation. And so for me, as a little kid, I think that really shaped me in several ways. But, that moment where you know that, everybody really wants the best for you, but they are just not in position to be able to, provide and see you really, achieve whatever they want you to do. And it was really, it was that feeling and state of hopelessness, that you're just helpless. And there's not very much you can do about the situation at that very moment. So for me, yeah, that feeling of just helplessness, that you know for sure that if things were different, they would really want to see you do that. But you also know the truth of the matter is that they are just not able to. So you end up, there's that feeling of helplessness that just prevails for that moment. But the good thing, was that the family support system. I remember I had an elder brother, who had just finished school in the city, and he had some good prospects of getting a job. So it really brought some hope into the picture. I remember I could call my dad and give him, ask him to, to give me the phone so I could speak with him, and he could give me this encouragement that, don't worry, things will be okay. We will eventually find the resources to take you to the school that, you want to go to. So that really brought in some dose of hope in that state of helplessness where everything seemed very uncertain. And, this dream of a very bright future seemed to be flickering right in front of your eyes and just disappearing. But to have someone who sort of, came in and gave you some hope that, yeah, you're in a very dark tunnel right now, but there is certainly some ray of light at the end of this tunnel. And so if you could just hold on that hope for a moment, and things will eventually be okay. So that was very helpful. But yeah, it's that state of feeling that you just wouldn't want anyone else to be in, you know. So, just looking back, as a kid with very little exposure to how things were, elsewhere, for me it was a very normal life at that particular point. You know, when I think about what, so I grew up like any other normal kid in the village. We had to do housework, cleaning the compound, and you wake up in the morning, you sweep the compound, you go and fetch some water from the borehole, you come home, when people eat, you do the dishes, and we played together as little kids, in the village. And we went to school together. So I began off, I started off in a public school, and I did that school for about a year. But I remember, so there's three school terms in Uganda. There's a first term, second term, and then third term. It's in third term that you get promoted to the next class. And I remember my dad, came to me and said, if you can work really hard and become number one in your class, I will take you to this really good, school, private school. Now, back then, the difference between a private school and a public school was just really, the number of students. You know, in a public school, it was much crowded. A lot of students in the same class. But in the private schools, the class sizes were much smaller. You got more attention from the schools. But in terms of the cost, it was pretty much the same. So the difference was just in terms of class size. But of course, that has changed significantly over time. So, I remember I was so excited. I told all my friends, I was like, if I can really get to be number one in class, I'm going to change school, and that was exciting for me. It was always something to look forward to. But things didn't really work out as I wanted to be. I remember that time I was number 8. Yeah, but my dad still took me to the new school. However, what that meant is because the standards were a little bit different, I had to repeat, my primary one. So I did the interviews, and my dad told me that I did not pass the interview. Which to this day I still think I really excelled in the interview, but he wanted me to have a more solid foundation. So I was taken back, and I repeated that class, and so that also changed the dynamics of how I interacted with some of my kids, because that was the easiest class, so to speak. So the social, understanding of that was that, how can you repeat such a class? So it was something I never wanted to talk about, even, as a little kid. And it's just, when I grew up a little much, that I started talking about it, like, I actually repeated primary one. So for me, that was a big setback. And, it's something that I didn't really want to talk about with my other, friends, and children within the village. There was a big shame around it, and it's like, you're sort of, looked down upon. It's like, come on, who really repeats such a class? So there was that social, sort of a social stigma, around repeat. I mean, you could repeat primary 7 or primary 6, but not primary 1, like the most basic. It's supposed to be the easiest of all. So for me, and I think it really affected my sort of my self-esteem very much, and so that's why I didn't really want to talk about it. And yeah, it was just unconventional. People laugh at you, and do all those kind of things. But it was later on that I look back, and I'm extremely thankful that it sort of put me in a different timeline, and I couldn't have really asked for anything better than that. That a lot of things have happened, because of that. So I had that solid foundation, by repeating that class. But yeah, it was a very normal childhood. It was just growing up in the village, and playing with kids, and just some bit of troublemaking in the village here and there with all the kids. As a little kid, I was. I look back and I realize that I got this gift of leadership from a very early age. Most of my peers always followed me around. And I always whether did amazing things together or caused trouble together, but I was the ringleader. Yeah, but one thing my parents did was really to kind of at a very early try to channel that for a good cause. So instead of sort of getting into some very bad groups and some causing a lot of chaos in the village, they really helped to, make sure, that gift was being channeled towards the right direction. And that is something that I do really, look back and I'm very thankful for. Yeah.
How did you see their struggle as a kid? What?
So as a little kid, I remember like my mother, especially, she always made sure that, we were aware, of, how things were, and the circumstances under which we were growing. So, we became, I personally was very mindful, certain things of, if I was going to school, for example, the demands that I make, things like, I need this, I need this, I had to sort of, pull back because now I went to school, especially when I changed school, I had, some of the children are coming from very well-off families, and so as a little kid, there's always that temptation to compare yourself with all the other kids, you see one kid with this in school and you go back home, it's like, hey, I need to also ask my parents to get me this, but, being aware of that, I had to sort of, hold back, it's like, it would be nice, to have such a thing, to have such a toy, but things are a little bit different. The circumstances at home demand that the priorities have to be a little bit different. So for me, that sort of always kept me in check. That and sometimes from being so pushy, and just demanding so much from my parents, I had to be reminded of that, and I just held back and was like, hey, they're already doing too much, to just ensure that we have a very decent and normal life. They really did so many things to ensure that we could have as much of a decent and normal childhood as possible. Normally sacrificing their own own comfort, making so much sacrifices. I remember my mom, for example, sometimes she didn't buy shoes for herself, just so maybe we could get a new school uniform. Uh, my dad was at the peak of in sort of the peak of his career. He was quite gifted. He could have afforded to buy a couple of cars for himself. But he instead opted to buy bicycles, so he could be able to pay school fees instead of buying a car, in the long. So some of those, choices they had to make along the way, And as a kid, observing all this, while growing up, I got to appreciate more the sort of sacrifices they were making. That even though they wanted so much for us, and even though we had very limited opportunities because of the resources we had available, we learned very naturally and very early on to really make the most out of what we had, to really appreciate the little that we had and realize that sometimes indeed there is so much in so little. So these are some of the things that I learned very early on, as a kid, especially just observing the way our parents conducted their lives. And they, one gift they all blessed us with is, they never limited how much we could dream, how big we could dream. They always made us believe that if we worked hard, if we made the most out of the little that we had, things could always be better. And that, I think, for me personally, it really shaped the way I look at the world. It really shaped how I see just the environment around me, and how much I appreciate wherever I have at my disposal. Yeah, but most important, I think the sacrifice also really ensured that for me, looking at that, today, I feel I'm in a place where I don't have a lot, but still, with the little I have, I can make an impact in other people's life. I can make some of those small impact and sacrifices too. That could mean so much, for someone else. So it also learned me, and taught me how to really, sort of assess from what point of privilege I stand, and how that could really be used to perhaps lift up someone else who might not be in the same place as I am in. I might not be exactly where I want to be, or but even in my place of where I'm still in a point of privilege compared to someone else somewhere out there in the society. So being aware of all this sort of just stems from just observing our parents in their way of raising us up, despite all the limitations that they had. as far as school is concerned, I remember my dad always had these conversations with us, so they openly told us, like, I never had the chance to get the kind of education that you guys are having. His education stopped at some point, and that's, his parents couldn't, be able to afford that, but he got a better education than his parents did. And so they wanted us to get a better education than they did too, so we could be able to provide a better education for our children than we do have. So that's sort of, progression from one generation to another. So for me, in school, having at the back of my mind all the challenges and the sacrifices my parents had to make to see us in school was a big motivation. So I knew the best way, I could thank them and appreciate them for their efforts and their sacrifice was to do my best and to really work hard in school. And at the end of the school term or school year, take home a report. That would give them an encouragement, and at least just give them that, encouragement that, the sacrifice is really worth it. So, for me, it kept me so focused. I remember even later on at my secondary school, I got a scholarship and went to really good secondary school that I felt completely out of place for the first few years, because people were coming from very affluent backgrounds, and there I was, trying to fit in and just trying to find my place. So very often it was really tough to adjust. I remember every evening after class I could go back to my bed and just break down in tears. Things were so tough, and things never got better at home. You just talk, mom is perhaps sick, one of your sisters, has been sent home because there's no school fees, So all these family issues, always, and me being in a situation where I feel, I just wish I could be able to do anything, but there's nothing I can do about it. I'm also just as another student in school. So again, it takes me back to that, sort of a trend that, I'm in a situation where, I wish I could be of help, but there's nothing. I just feel helpless and disempowered. There's nothing I can do about it. So that is a very frustrating feeling. And for me, that's, yeah, it always really broke me down. But it also made me grow so much, in my personal life and especially in my spiritual life. I started praying a lot, and I found more encouragement and more hope in just, trying to connect, with, with a higher. I always believe there's got to be some higher voice out there, there's got to be a God out there, and He better does something right now, So it got me really grounded in my faith, because I always saw results at the end of the day, and for me that made me believe that there's got to be some higher purpose out there. And yeah, so but overall, that sort of background saw me really stay focused in school, and it helped me perform quite well. And I realized that the best thing I could do was to sort of channel that anger and that frustration into a positive energy, and sort of do something with that energy, as instead of just crying in my bed, or just being angry and being disappointed in life and just feeling pity for myself. It's like I didn't need that. I had to channel that energy into something more productive that yielded results. And for me, I was a student, so I had to make sure, I could, bring out results, that at least, would give my parents more encouragement, would give my teachers, some faith to really, continue believing in me, And so for me, yeah, that was it, just channeling that, that energy, that's sometimes frustration. Frustration draws a lot of energy from you. It's a lot of negative energy. But how do you turn that negative energy into something positive and productive? So I channel that towards my education, towards my academics. And I worked really hard, and it paid off. In a lot of ways. And that's when I saw that education really opens a lot of doors. That is one thing our parents always told us, that we have very limited opportunities now because of the education that we had, but we want you to get a better education so you can have access to better opportunities in life, And I think, that has begun to pay off. There are opportunities I have access to today. There are people that I've met that have, tremendously had an impact in my life. And I am who I am because of, the works of so many other people. And I continue growing into the person, I would love to be, because of the efforts and the belief that other people, do have in me. And for me, that's a challenge at the same time. The best way I can, you know, appreciate them, or perhaps, pay them back, is to be able to do the same for other people. A lot of people have lifted me up. So if I can be able to, find someone else, and using the little resources that I have to lift other people up, I think, that would be a way to appreciate the investments that others have had in me. First of all, channeling, sort of like transitioning a negative energy into something positive. First, you have to be aware of the detrimental effects of, that anger. Like, just what does negative energy do to me? And I became more aware of that. I saw, just being angry about something, or being frustrated about something, and stopping that doesn't really do much. So I began to see, is there something, else that I could channel this into? What if, I could use this as, an encouragement, as a motivation to work even harder in class. And I began doing just that. So it was first becoming aware of, the negative impacts that negative energy was having on my personal well-being, and then deliberately beginning to explore how I could channel that and begin doing something, good with it. So I saw, the hardships I went through. I saw all those as a motivation, for me to work harder, because I knew by working harder, by, focusing on something that produced more results, I would be able to change some of those outcomes and perhaps change the narrative. And that's exactly what I did. Yeah, yeah. So, to overcome a challenge, you just grow into this, you grow from this point of, where your life, you have all these hardships, right? But all these hardships shape us sometimes in ways that, we do not realize. And for me, one thing it really did to me was that, one, it helped me to, appreciate life more. It helped me to see value in a lot of, little things that sometimes we just, forgo. We sometimes just let go. And so by beginning to really, see that, this is not how life is supposed to be. At least this is not how I want to live my life forever. There's got to be some better outcome somewhere. There's got to be some light at the end of the tunnel. And if you become aware of the other possibilities, because one thing, a lot of the hardships and challenges we go through life, what they do to us is they tend to make us forget the possibility of a different outcome. We tend to think that that's how things are supposed to be, and we just keep meandering in this, hardships and challenges, and very soon we begin to allow those challenges to define who we are, which is not always the case. So for me, I began imagining, a different life. I began imagining a better life. I began imagining better and different outcomes, right? And so, there's this quote that says, what the human mind can conceive, it can achieve. So for me, by conceiving a better outcome, by conceiving possibilities of a different life, I slowly began working towards achieving that. And again, I cannot overemphasize, how lucky I was that, there are people too who saw the possibilities in me. There are people too who really believed in me, and as a result, gave me the opportunities that allow me to, really step out of those, challenges, and begin to really explore what, possibilities life could usher me into. If I think about from the head teacher that told me, that, there's a school in Kampala that is offering this scholarship. And when I got there, I learned of another opportunity through a friend. That's how I learned about the United World Colleges, right? and I did apply, and they gave me a full scholarship. From there, I learned of a university in the United States, the University of Oklahoma. That's why I ended up for my my bachelor's degree. So all these different people, you're seeing that there is potential in this young man. And I was able to also see that the outcomes are different, and I think it's so beautiful that sometimes when we begin to imagine some positive outcomes, we attract a lot of positive energy, and when we begin to develop that positive mindset, we bring a lot of positive people around us, and a lot of positive things begin to happen, so for me, sort of from those hardships, I was like, well, I think it's time for me to begin imagining a better life, and better outcomes, and let's see what that does. And what that did for me was that it brought in my life the right people who believed in me and invested in me and gave me the opportunities to explore what potentials I had in me. But I think it has a lot to do with the mindset. Without a positive mindset, it's really hard to do anything positive. So for me, I realized very quickly that you have to develop the right mindset. And one thing that hardships do to us is they help us build a lot of resilience. We are able to easily adopt some of the situations. But if you can now just add a dose of some positive mindset, and stay optimistic, that is one thing that I like to say, that I feel I'm naturally optimistic, But I think it has a lot to do with my background, all the challenges I went through, and how things somehow always turned out to be better, So it has given me a very optimistic, way of looking at the world. That no matter what sort of hardships now, no matter what sort of challenges I go through, I know there is a positive outcome that is possible, if we are willing to see it. So if your mind is able to see a pathway towards a positive outcome, even if that path doesn't exist, perhaps you'll sometimes find a way of creating that path towards that positive outcome. And for me, that has been really, really, helpful in my own life. So when my teacher told me about my head teacher told me about Light Academy, which is a school that I eventually went to, he told me about the scholarship, and I was very excited. My dad found out about it very proactively, and he was the happiest man alive. He immediately contacted the head teacher, and the head teacher told him, we are giving 20 scholarships this year, and 18 of them have already been taken. There are 2 more left. And if your son is to have a chance, he has to be in school here tomorrow by 8 a.m. Now, I'm about 300 kilometers away from the city. It's about a 6-hour drive. This is late in the afternoon. There's just one more bus heading to the capital that night. So miss that night, miss that bus, and everything is gone. And I'd never been out of my hometown. So it was the very first time, and I could only travel on my own because there was no one else traveling that night. So my dad puts me in the bus, and off I went. I arrived in Kampala at around midnight, and I'd never been to the capital city before. So you can imagine, it was a whole new world. Like all those buildings looked like skyscrapers to me. Electricity everywhere, cars in the streets. I was like, where am I? It was different. It was absolutely different. And the next day I go to the school, and in my mind I thought it was just a matter of signing the admission letters, and I'm in. I was a little bit shocked because I had to do an interview. So I still have to do a math and English interview. And in both of which I had to score at least 85%. Now, I'd been home for some time. I'd never opened a book during the school vacation, so I wasn't really sure about what I was able, to do in those exams. But I did what I could do, and I got exactly 85%, right on the border, and it was just pure luck, and I got the scholarship. I could definitely, see that my life had changed. I was like, at this bridge. It's sort of like I was just minutes away from missing the train, and I just caught the train that took me to where I wanted to be, And without that, my life would have been very different, So that was a key turning point, and it definitely changed my life that moment, getting admitted to Light Academy Secondary School, it was a life-changing moment, right? And but for me, what that meant also was that because the expectations now, I was under, an agreement. The school gave me a scholarship, and they expected certain things from me. It was a conditional scholarship that you could keep for all the 4 years of your O levels education, and whether you'll get the scholarship the next year or not depended on your performance on this, on the year before. So that means I didn't have a lot of leeway to relax. And for me, my options were clear. You either maintain the scholarship and stay in school, or you go back home in the village, and life would be very different. So, and I knew what I wanted. I didn't want to. So it was the decision, the choice was very clear for me. So I had to do my best to ensure that, I maintained the scholarship for 4 years. And I was extremely lucky that, I had a lot of teachers who believed in me and they gave me so much support. I had amazing classmates, who were very helpful, and they just made it, really possible for me to really, achieve my academic goals in school. And just the support system, at home, a very encouraging atmosphere. So for me, that really helped me, stay focused. And I didn't really focus so much on the pressure of trying to keep that, but instead on what I could possibly do, to really just ensure that I performed. And so I didn't focus on what I could not do or what could happen if this did not happen, but more focused my energy on the things I could do and what I had control over, and which was, working hard, studying hard, consulting with teachers, group discussions with friends, asking questions, and just getting help from wherever needed it to ensure that, I was on track. And that is exactly, what I did, and that's, what happened. And I was just lucky, to finish, my 4 years at Light Academy. And then from there, at the end of my 4th year, we had another national exams. And that was another, sort of bridge to cross, because, how I would perform in the national exams in my senior 4 would determine if I would get another scholarship to complete my secondary education or go back home. So the odds hadn't changed at all. And I was just hoping for one thing. It's like, if I can, if the results just turn out good and I can get another scholarship so I can finish the last 2 years of my secondary school and hopefully get a government scholarship to do my university, right? So, the only hope for me to continue with my education was through some form of scholarship. That was it at that point. And so we did the national exams, and it was a very hard time. Towards our final exams, I got really sick. I had this really bad cough that when I coughed, I felt as if the walls of the classroom were shaking. It was really bad. But even despite all that, I just stayed focused and got some medication. And when we did the national exams, the results turned out, and I was among the best in my class. And that was a big relief for me, but most importantly for my parents, because they knew there was some continuity in terms of my staying in school. So the school offered me another scholarship to continue my A levels, and it was in that process that I had a friend that joined in from another school, and he was the one who told me about the United World Colleges. So, and he was just like this angel that came and delivered this message to me. And I was like, you should apply too. And I told all my friends, and I had a lot of friends who were way, way brighter and more brilliant and had so much potential than I thought I did. So I recommended them. I said, you guys, there's this opportunity. Why don't you seize it? And for some reason, none of them seemed very interested. Like, nah, those things don't work. But I just took that leap of faith, and I did apply. I was called for the interviews, a few weeks later. I went for the interviews, and on the evening of the interview, I must say that when I went for the interview, I felt very out of place. We had some of the students from some of the best schools, and I was like, how can I compete with these guys, right? So, for me, it was a little bit, I was like, I don't think I have a chance here at all. But I met this one gentleman, he was the chairman of the national committee. and he was this fatherly figure that just, changed. And when he walked in, the entire atmosphere changed. At least I felt that way. And he treated everybody the same. And when I met him, and just shook his hand and looked in his eye, I just felt like, huh, like the hope had left the room, and it just sort of came back. And I was like, I think I have a chance. And his name was Mr. Bazanya, and he just changed the environment for me. And yeah, so I went into the interview, and we did, it was a long day of interviews, a lot of activities, and at the end of the day, they announced the results, and yeah, I'd gotten the scholarship to go to UWC in Flekke at Red Cross Nordic here in Norway. Now, at that moment, you see, when I got the scholarship to go to the secondary school, like that was a major turning point. Now, this was another key turning point for me because not only had I gotten a scholarship to continue with my education, but to actually do that and for the first time leave my country and leave the African continent. And the UWC is a really unique educational setting because we have students from all over the world. And so for me, just the thought of being able to stay in the classroom and study with friends from every corner of the world, it was just something that I could have never dreamt of. It was absolutely life changing. And so, to just tell my parents that I'd gotten the scholarship, because when I learned about the opportunity, I remember talking to my dad, and he was like, "Huh, well, you try your luck, and we shall pray for you." And that was it. So I didn't really know, and I did just try my luck, and things turned out. So I told them, and it was just a game changer. And that just the process of preparing me, to come here, and it was something that really brought my family together as well. I saw a lot of some distant relatives that I'd never seen before. There was that send off that came. But it was really, a life-changing moment, not only for me, but for my family, and, it really brought a lot of people together. But even with that, of course, that wasn't the end of it, because I had to do a lot of things in that process of getting, so getting to Norway was a whole new process, you know. And again, that is why, I look back through some of the things I'd gone through in life, and I knew that, it gave me hope that despite the hardships I was going through, just getting the visa, So when I got the scholarship, luckily I had a passport already. The school that I was in had processed a passport for me earlier on. So that sort of took off some burden, but there was no money to, pay for the visa, And so, we had to sell a few things from home to be able to get the money to pay for the visa. And I applied for the visa, and I did not get my visa until the very last moment. So picture this, you have this family and friends so excited to send off their son to go and have this amazing education somewhere in the world, but they have no idea that without this document he could never travel. So I was aware of that, and I could see, I remember I was asking myself, what if I don't get the visa? What sort of disappointment would all these people have? And everybody seemed so happy and excited, But, so the weight of that dawned upon me, and I was like, wow, I didn't think about this. So, the week before they travel, and I keep calling the embassy, they say, yeah, we're working on it, we'll get back to you. The next day, it's like, we shall get back to you. And it's Friday, my flight is on Sunday evening, It's Friday, they're like, we'll get back to you, and it's Saturday. And on Saturday, the embassy only opens half a day. So I'm like, I need to go to this place. So I go to the embassy that morning on Saturday, and I tell them I'm traveling tomorrow, and I need to get my visa, but I haven't heard of anything yet. And they're like, the security at the embassy said, do you have an invitation? I said, no, but I'm traveling tomorrow. And they were like, without an invitation, we won't let you in. So it was, it was a very tense moment for me, and I could just, I could again see the opportunity almost just, flickering away. And so, I went back into town, and, I went to this internet cafe and just checked if I'd gotten some email, and luckily I got an email that was saying, yeah, you can come and pick up your document, so I printed it out and dashed to the embassy, I showed the security guys, like, is this what you wanted, and they're like, sure. So, I get in, and yeah, it's about 1 p.m. The embassy closes officially, and I'm inside there still waiting for my document, and the very last minute, I get back my passport, and there is the Norwegian visa, and it was, I felt a very big relief, because I had all this weight, and I was just thinking of, what could possibly happen, and all the preparations that people are having, this is the one event that has really brought the family together, and I just couldn't imagine, the level of disappointment and frustration they would go through, if I told them the news that was, this is not happening, But luckily things turned out, as we expected, and that was a big relief on me for sure. And yeah, I could now see that this is definitely happening, And yeah, I moved to Norway, and the 2 years I spent, at the UWC were just completely life changing, And for me, it was the 2 years I felt I grew the most, because I was completely out of my comfort zone again. And here you are experiencing life with a lot of other young people, just your age mates from all corners of the world, very different backgrounds, completely different cultures, and somehow you have to peacefully coexist together for 2 years, And there's so many people who are just curiously desiring to learn about your culture, to know more about you, So for me, it was really, a big challenge to realize, I was not just, a normal student from Uganda. I was sort of an ambassador for my country and for my people and my culture, like everyone else was, So someone who had never been to Uganda, that never met a Ugandan, would perhaps, I would be their first encounter of who a Ugandan is, of what Uganda is like, So for me, that was also a big responsibility too, So it really challenged me to learn more about my culture, to learn more about my country, so I could be in a position where I could talk to someone and really tell them about my country, and just have that open mind too, to learn from other people. There are so many countries that always wanted to learn about, and here you are, you have the opportunity to speak to someone from there and live life with them together, So in the end, you look back and you see how transformative, that sort of experience was, So for me, it was definitely a life-changing experience, and I wouldn't be where I am today, had it not been because of all those experiences. So after that, I went to the University of Oklahoma. So it's quite interesting how, it sort of, it seems very random, the places I end up in, And in Norway, when, in Flekke, in Sogn og Fjordane, in the middle of Norway, in the beautiful Norwegian fjords, And then of all the places one could go to in the United States, I ended up in Oklahoma, in the central Midwest, very much the middle of nowhere. That a lot of my friends in Rwanda is like, how does one move from Norway to Oklahoma, And the truth is, I didn't know very much about Oklahoma, and all I knew was the University of Oklahoma. And the university had a wonderful program that I wanted to do. They offered me a very generous scholarship through the Davis UWC Scholars Program. And, Oklahoma was, my life in Oklahoma has been amazing because of, again, the sense of community that exists. We have quite a large population of international students too. About 12% of the university is international. So, getting plugged into that, international community, but also just, the American, way of life is a little bit different, So here I was, from Uganda to Norway, but I think my time at the UWC in Flekke was really a good preparation for the US. It made my transition, much easier because I'd been exposed to so many cultures, including the American culture to some extent. So that transition was much easier. And at the university, we have this thing called the Davis Scholars Program, which sort of works a lot of other students coming from the different UWCs from around the world. And so, that made the transition also very easy. Having people who shared a lot in common with you made the transition into a very new culture and environment much easier and much smoother. And for me, that was also, it really created in me that desire to really, work with a lot of international students. And I understood and realized that not every international student had the same privilege that I had, to sort of go through that same experience of, the smooth transition where you already know a few people, the people who came in and, they know nobody, So for me, I always look for the opportunity to serve, this sort of international community, and I got very engaged with a lot of international student life, just as a way of giving back and just appreciating, all those who had supported me, but sort of making that life a little bit easier for other people too, who perhaps did not share the same path as I did. For me, the startup, what happened here is it has always been about, just looking back at my own educational journey specifically, I always ask myself, what can I do to give back to my community, to my country, and what can I do as a way of appreciating all the incredible works that other people, have done in my life, what could I do as a sign of appreciation to all the people who have believed and invested so heavily in me, and for me, I look at all this and my personal experiences, which has always been, opportunity, as I said at the beginning, I very much believe that talent and potential is distributed all across the board, but the opportunity is not equally distributed. So for me to narrow down to say, so what kind of opportunity would be one of the most meaningful opportunities to give access to, that would be really life-changing. And it dawned upon me, that would be education. The former Nobel Peace Laureate and former President of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I look at that personally in my life and see how my own world has changed because of the various opportunities that I got because of an education. And so for me, the startup Marifa Sasa was always about really sort of gathering all that experience and doing something that would in a way help me sort of perhaps provide me the platform to create opportunities for other people. And so Marifa Sasa, which is Swahili that means knowledge right now, is all about really, creating access to opportunities to, quality education, really helping other people to realize the true and fullest potential through access to quality education. So we leverage, technology, to really be able to give us access, Because when I think about, especially the role of technology, when I heard about the UWC scholarship, my friend told me they have a website, you have to go and Google it, And so being able to know that, oh, there's this tool called the internet and, there's a browser that you can go to and, find this sort of information, a lot of my peers did not have this sort of opportunities, They did not know how to use some of these tools, let alone having access to some of these technological tools, So for me, it was really important, that, whatever I would do, would be able to, would be focused on creating those opportunities that would, in the end, there are a lot of Bobs out there, there are a lot of, amazing and more talented people that I am. I have been extremely lucky and very privileged, But it's not just enough to be lucky and to be privileged, What do you do with that privilege, And so for me, it was about challenging myself to do something that would also help, lift other people and give them access to the opportunities that, I have been able to have access to. And luckily, my co-founder, Ismail Ombo, who is from South Sudan, he has a very similar story, coming from South Sudan, the effects of war in South Sudan, He got a UWC scholarship as well, he was in Adriatic College in Italy, but we met at the University of Oklahoma, And so, we had a very shared sort of experience on our backgrounds, we had a very similar background, And, what we wanted to do, we shared this vision, of creating access to meaningful education opportunities, and just helping, our people, especially in our communities, to be able to realize their potential too. And so, we came together, and that's how, Marifa Sasa, was born. I know and I understand how you feel, and it's just natural that in life we will always experience challenges. Sometimes you feel you're doing your very best, but things are just not working out as they should be, and you feel as if you've been forgotten by even the most dear people in your life. But that's not how life is supposed to be. And I can assure you that, from my own life, I have learned that yes, sometimes the challenges and the hardships we go through tend to define who we are. But that is only if we allow them to. But things don't have to be that way, because there is always light at the end of the tunnel. There is always the possibility of a better outcome. So no matter what you're going through life right now, I know just in you, you have everything it takes to actually unlock and unleash that potential. And for me, that was just a matter of discovering that, for every adversity I go through in life, there is an equal or even greater positive outcome. There were greater possibilities that could come. So maybe you're out of school, maybe your parents have neglected you, maybe you just feel rejected by society, maybe you feel as if you're less of a human than other people elsewhere in the world. That is a hard feeling. But remember, you have better days ahead of you. You are much capable of doing better things in life. So do not let the hardships define you. Just believe in the possibilities of a better future. Imagine a better life for yourself. That is always a starting point. So just go for it and stay focused. Hard work is definitely important. And somehow, somewhere, someone will notice you. Okay. So just keep working hard, and you will find someone that will notice and reward your hard work. So just a bit of a practical advice on some of the things that you can do. You're out there in a village school. One thing that really worked for me was to just listen to my teachers. Heed their advice. They have definitely gone and traveled this journey before us. But I'll give you a very good example. Personally, it was one of my head teachers that recommended me to a scholarship, at Light Academy in Kampala. That's because, I'd shown very good conduct as a student. I was hardworking, I was very disciplined, and as a result, I was noticed by my teachers, and I was really appreciated by my teachers. And because of that, they saw me going through a hard moment, and they looked out for me and looked for opportunities that I could make, a use of. But that won't happen if you're the troublemaker in school, if you do not listen to your teachers, if you don't have a good relationship, with the people around you. So it's really important that you focus on building the good organic relationships with the people around you, and those are the people that will come by your side in times of need. When you are really stuck, they will be the people to offer you a shoulder to lean on. So focus on building those relationships, even with your classmates. I learned of the opportunity to go to Norway at UWC from a friend. That's because we were friends first, and friends look out for their friends. So he was able to give me that hint, because like my friend could perhaps benefit from this. So relationships, friendships, these are things that take us very far in life, more than any material possession could ever. So focus on building those good relationships and friendships with those around you. Be kind to one another. Kindness has this power to really change, the world around us. So these are some of the practical things that I did practice and continue to practice, and I believe just as it has really had an impact in my life, it could too in your life. One way to get started is just do it. Now, Nike didn't pay me to tell you that, but I just believe that by taking action, what is that dream that you've always had? Have you always thought of maybe playing football, soccer? Are you a talented singer? But what is it that you have been holding in your heart and you've always, wanted to do, but for some reasons you have perhaps just had several excuses. Maybe even people have told you that you're not good enough, or you cannot do this. No one like you has ever done this. What is that one thing? Well, I'm telling you that just stop watching this video and go and just start doing it. Somewhere, somehow, you will be noticed by someone who believes in you. And those are the people that you attract when you begin taking action towards the direction you want to go. You attract people who believe in you. So just do it, and just go and do it. There's a saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So what is that one step you're going to take right now? Go for it.